At this point, dear audience, I'd like to introduce to you our first topic for today, Europe's Green Deal in times of COVID-19, a roadmap for global sustainability. To provide our panelists with some input and data, I invite you to answer the following poll on slido.com with the event code EIF20. Is a successful Green Deal Europe's top priority? We will have a look at the results halfway into our panel discussion. But without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to Dimitar Lilkov, Research Officer at the Martin Center, who will moderate the first debate. Dimitar, over to you.
Thank you, Anna. Hello to our viewers, and thank you for tuning in. The European Green Deal was announced in the end of last year, but 2019 already feels as if it happened a decade ago. Because of COVID-19, we like to talk about the new normal, but we shouldn't forget that our old problems haven't been solved. Tackling climate change and the transition towards a more sustainable economy has been one of the main priorities of the European Commission. However, the green transition and all of these topics become even more important, and especially the Green Deal, when we talk about economic recovery, when we talk about the pandemic, and we talk about the restructuring of our economies. This is quite a complex topic, but I feel that today's panel is up to the task. I'm really happy that today we're joined by 4 professionals from different backgrounds. Coming from the European Parliament, joining online is Maria Spiraki. She has been a member of the European Parliament since 2014, representing the EP's Neo Democratia party. Ms. Spiraki sits in the Parliamentary Committee on Industry, Research and Energy, and she also has extensive prior experience as a journalist. Maria, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Jyrki Katainen, the current president of Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund. Jyrki Katainen served as vice president of the European Commission from 2014 to 2019, and also he was Prime Minister of Finland from 2011 to 2014. Mr. Katainen, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
From the European Commission, we have Mr. Temo Baltazar, who currently serves as a principal advisor for corporate and political communication in the Director General for Communications, DG.com, of the European Commission. Telmo, hello.
Hello, hi Dimitar, thank you for having us.
And last but not least, we have Mark Lange joining us, who is currently the Senior Director of European Government Affairs at Microsoft Europe. Mark leads a team dedicated to sustainability and green growth policy issues, and he has prior extensive experience at an international law firm. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So let's kick off today's panel. And Telmo, I have a question for you. Last year, the European Commission announced, and President von der Leyen said that the European Green Deal is Europe's man on the moon moment. Today, is the European Commission still aiming at the moon?
Well, thank you very much, Dimitar, and thank you also for President Dzurinda's introduction, and I hope that we will be faithful to it. I wanted to say more than you have to shoot for the stars on this one, on the Green Deal. Why it is very important that this has used the goal, the long-term goal of becoming climate neutral should be used for Europe as both an economic opportunity for all of the 27 member states, as well as a vector for further unity. And if you allow me, more than simply having the European Union and Brussels setting targets, it should provide direction to member states to help them transforming, modernizing their economies in a way of using better the resources they have and transforming, let's say, some very old ways of producing electricity, for instance, into cleaner, cheaper, and certainly without producing as much carbon dioxide. The goal of the Green Deal, more than the man of the moon shot, should be actually a shot towards Mars. Looking further beyond and saying, well, it should be in the interest of all Europeans. But I just said two points on this, if I may, as part also of the introduction. Let us bear in mind why we need to do this. It's not just because we have to fulfill the commitments that were taken by the international community, including by the European Union in the Paris Agreement in 2015, but also because it should be in the interest of all our operators. Our European industry today utilizes only 12% of recycled materials. This means that she is very much dependent from new raw materials. Possibly that's not the best way that we can have of making use of materials in order to have industrial processes. That's why one of the big vectors of the Green Deal is the focus on innovation, something that is not just being announced by President von der Leyen. This is something, the foundations of which had already been laid out by the previous commission, one that in particular under the responsibility of Vice President Katainen at the time and Commissioner Carlos Moedas at the time, who really set the ground, the foundations on the basis of which the Green Deal can be built, particularly on the sides of innovation. Again, more than we need innovation to get to the moon, we need innovation to get to Mars, we need innovation to become climate neutral by 2050. It will not be easy. It will require a lot of persuasion to bring governments along, to bring businesses along, but more importantly, to bring the people along, because that's the ones we have to provide the better conditions for a good future.
Thank you, Teemu. Quick follow-up to you. Do you think that the current corona crisis will make the member states less engaged with the Green Deal when it comes to funding, and especially when it comes to actual reforms? Are they still that engaged?
Well, it depends very much on the way there will be political consequences, of course, of the crisis and the way in which governments have dealt with the crisis. So probably we may be seeing into a different political reality in the coming years. Let's hope that nevertheless, let's hope and let's work nevertheless, at least that let's say the more mainstream parties, the more centrist parties, are the ones that actually care about the future of the people, do pursue policies that aim at modernizing their economies to becoming less dependent, for instance, on fossil fuels which are imported always at a cost, and also to avoid situations that would create, let's say, more political disruptions.
Thank you. Maria, over to you. Give us the view of the European Parliament and share some of the dynamic there. Microphone, please. No, we still can't hear you. Maybe if you're not able to unmute, maybe we'll go to Mr. Katainen. Yeah, Ms. Piraki, please, if you will be able to see the software. We're going to be jumping right now to Mr. Katainen. Can you give us your opening remarks on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me first say that I enjoyed a lot listening President Turinda's speech. It consisted all the relevant forces we have to recognize for when building our future. It's also nice to be in the same panel with my old colleagues Maria and Telma, and also with Mark Lange. So my viewpoint is very much jobs, growth, investment, and competitiveness related. I see that there are two overwhelming forces which will have impact to our economy and business incoming. And the first one of those is climate change and circular economy. And the second one is the rise of data economy. And of course, today I will concentrate mostly on climate change and circular economy. So we all have heard lots of big numbers, how much we need additional new investments in order to address climate change. And everybody understands that it's not doable only by using taxpayers' money. So for instance, if putting the recovery funds aim to allocate additional resources to address climate change and boost green economy, this amount of money which has now been planned to use for this kind of purposes represents only 8% of the overall need for additional new investments over the next years. It's significant 8%, but it's only the 8%. And this is a good example which proves that we have to concentrate mostly on incentives which makes private sector to invest more in sustainable economy. I don't want to undermine the value of Green Deal because I find that it's really the European moon project. And it's the biggest, globally thinking, it's the biggest single policy initiative which will have a significant impact to our future. Europe will show the way how to build sustainable economy and how to build more sustainable carbon neutral economy in a world, and it makes us interesting for third country investors and those who want to participate to the one card market. So I'm very satisfied for Ursula von der Leyen's view that she wanted to prioritize European Green Deal. But coming back to the private sector's role, so EU is a market regulator, and it gives us a good opportunity to use our regulatory power to create new incentives for private business to offer climate neutral services and products. And it means just understanding amongst the legislators that we don't regulate wrong things, or we don't try to achieve partial results when regulating something. Market regulation is always quite challenging task, and we have to be very careful when using the regulatory power. But I still believe that the European single market is the best single tool which could create new incentives and create sustainable market when trying to achieve Paris climate targets. The tide has changed in the people's mind. When I say people's mind, I mean us as a consumer, us as a citizens, but also business leaders' mind has changed. A few years ago, it was normal to complain that climate policy is additional burden for industry or for business. Now things have changed, and many business leaders see the situation just the opposite. They see it as a necessity. We have to do whatever it takes to address the climate change, but also many business leaders see this as an opportunity. And that's why the pressure within Europe is growing, that we need intelligent regulation to create incentives for businesses to invest in pure technologies. So as I said, I look at the situation very much from jobs growth, investment and competitiveness point of view. And if I should conclude just by raising one point, what I find the most interesting tool, it is the European single market. Because if we change the market, if we create new incentives, then we can let the private sector to take care most of the challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Katainen. You have been quite vocal that the recovery fund needs to be spent on promoting the circular economy, reducing CO2 emissions. Now, looking at the drafts of the recovery plan of the next MFF for the next 7 years, do you think that there is something missing?
Well, the recovery fund is basically very good, but I have liked to stick to Commission of original proposal in a sense that I would have liked to see more Europe. Now, when the member states are in a position that they can very freely choose how to use the money, I'm a little bit worried that the money is not necessarily going to the direction which would achieve our joint objectives. But this is quite courageous to say so. Someone may think that I don't trust on member states. This is not the case. But Okay, let's put it this way. I hope that member states would use the money for achieving EU's joint objectives. And what I have done here in Finland, in my country, I have advised our government to use at least half of the recovery funds money for research and innovations, and earmark this money to circular economy, but also digitalization and data economy. But I believe in R&D and I investments.
Yeah, we do hope that the member states follow these steps, and also the European institutions build the proper mechanisms to achieve these goals. Maria, I think that now everything's okay with the connection, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And before I start, I would like to share with you the thoughts that I have having the presence of Vice President Katainen, or former Vice President. It is an honor for us to have him here in the panel. He is a leader in terms of circular economy, and he's also the initiator of a very emblematic piece of legislation, the Single-Use Plastic Directive. Having said that, I would like to go very, very brief to the targets that we have to have in terms of European legislation. I think that we have to be very, very ambitious by setting global standards through our legislation. It is also important to establish a green, circular and digital market to our industry services. And it is also important to reduce fear people facing in front of technological transformation and the future of their jobs. In this regard, I think that we have to make some steps, very significant, but very fast as well. The first one is that we have to have the proper legislation. And we are waiting from the leaders, we are waiting from the European leaders that they have to succeed, they have to conclude an agreement at the latest on December concerning climate law. It is important to take into account that the target, at least 55% reduction of greenhouse gas emission, it is a target that it comes with an impact assessment, and it is an achievable target. We have, of course, to facilitate and incentivize our industry and SMEs in order to speed up transforming themselves into green and digital. The second one is that we have to have at the same period a new MFF, an MFF that it is focusing on research and innovation, and I fully agree with Vice President Katainen. And in this regard, we have to have an MFF that it has the proper and adequate funding for research and innovation. Talking about MFF, I would like just to focus on the issue of rule of law, telling that respect to the rule of law is a non-negotiable European principle. And we must make the message loud and clear. EU funds are not available for those who are not sharing our values. And we have to do more. We have to go ahead, but not saying to the people and to the markets not to do something, but saying to the people and to the markets how to do something. I have the two paradigms, two examples very close to my heart because I was involved in this kind of legislative framework. The first one is the sustainable strategy for chemicals, the chemical strategy for sustainability. And the second one is the renovation wave. Both of them could be a kind of locomotives in the global market in terms of setting high and very ambitious global standards. The fourth I need to underline is that we have to make the objectives of the Green Deal more of a human goal and less one that is based on numbers. And in this regard, I think that we have to engage people, not only by reskilling and upskilling people in the digital literatures, but also by increasing the awareness of all European citizens, not only on the consequences of climate change, but of the benefits of investing in the green transition. Benefits which could include the repatriation of jobs and talents, benefits that could include the environmental but also economic sustainability of our industry, benefits that could include the branding of European economy as a green economy, both on the demand as on the supply side. I would like to conclude with this. We are a global actor. We have to take into account that we have to have partnerships with the other global actors. But regardless the results of the US elections, I think that we must further explore the potential for implementing Paris Agreement and in a way expanding Green Deal outside the EU, abroad, by having on board states and various stakeholders. And of course, you know that it is still unclear if Biden's get elected, and if the Biden administration finally go ahead with prohibiting fracking or other activities that they are very harmful to the environment. And taking into account that China is putting also ambitious target, becoming a carbon neutral by 2060, as well as there is a progress on adapting its own version of emission trade system, which could be a complementary system like ours. It is important to take into account also that China is a strategic rival. In this regard, I think that the opportunity of Green Deal in the period of tackling the consequences of COVID-19, it is an opportunity now or never. By raising the challenge of the Green Deal transition, Europe will not only manage a speedy recovery, but also emerge as a global economic and political pioneer, and eventually as a global leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very quick follow-up. You are co-chair of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change and Biodiversity. And talking about thorny issues and difficult topics, how important is the agricultural sector when we talk about the Green Deal? And is this a bottleneck for the Commission, for the Parliament, given so many interests involved in the common agricultural policy and the whole agricultural sector?
Yes, it is a very difficult question. We have to engage our agricultural sector to the Green Deal. And we have to provide also technical assistance to our people. But the case is that we now have the roadmap, and the roadmap is from farm to fork strategy, and it is also the new CAP. So it is important to ensure sustainable food production. It is important to ensure sustainability to all levels of production in our food value chain. It is also important not to get into details, that it is a part of the national legislation, and it is a part of national competence. And allow me to give just a very quick example. It is important to follow also the new strategies that they are now providing new tools, like the methane strategy, which is giving the agricultural sector an opportunity to use renewable energy and investing in biogas production from agricultural waste and residues.
Thanks. Mark, on to you. We've heard from different stakeholders on this very complex topic. Where's the private sector in all of this?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to add some industry perspective to this interesting panel. I'm honored to be here. I'd say that Microsoft and much of the industry certainly recognizes that Europe has the role of the epicenter of the sustainability agenda, including the green recovery plans. We've made substantial commitments in this area that align with the EU goals, and we're working with private sector partners as well as EU institutions to ensure that the Green Deal is successful and is a model for the rest of the world. For the EU to achieve emissions reductions in the range of 55% by 2030, action will be needed across the board by governments, businesses, NGOs. As a company with significant European operations, we've aligned with leading European companies to support ambitious targets in the Climate Act because we think it's both necessary and realistic. We've made our own efforts in advance of regulatory requirements because we recognize it is good for both business and for the environment. Our collective mission towards reaching net zero emissions requires more collaboration, in particular as we work to achieve a green recovery. And I think especially the EU's emphasis on carbon accountability is a very important element to drive change and stimulate green investment. The digital sector provides technology that enables all other sectors to achieve their sustainability goals. But we are also acutely aware that our sector must be green and must reduce its direct impact on the environment. So as a company, Microsoft set a goal to become carbon negative by 2030. So take out more carbon than we emit. And by 2050, to remove all our historical emissions. So since the company was founded in 1975. And we determined we could strive for this kind of target precisely because we started with a strategy of carbon accountability a decade ago. By imposing an internal carbon fee on all our business units, covering everything from data centers to business travel, we forced carbon accounting.
I think we have an issue with the reception coming from Mark.
All the other speakers have noted. I'm sorry?
Yeah, we had a little glitch on the transmission, but now the connection is perfect.
Oh, okay. Did you miss anything?
5 seconds, sorry. The last 5 seconds.
Well, I was just noting that investing in innovation is critical, as the other speakers have noted. And
so, Mark, maybe back to you. A couple of closing sentences. I think we dropped you in the final part of your opening remarks.
Yes, and let's see. I was emphasizing the point about carbon accountability and also innovation, but I'd just like to, basically say that as a data company, you'll not be surprised that we believe in the power of data analytics and artificial intelligence to help companies and governments understand better the impacts on the environment and how to address them. So we also share the EU's goals on data sharing and data spaces and would like to join up efforts in that regard. But I would conclude just to say, we commend the EU for demonstrating what's really needed, and that's the persistent political will to push a green growth agenda, especially after the economic crisis. But I'll leave it at that and look forward to discussion.
Just a quick follow-up from my side. When we go through the text of the European Green Deal, we see the enormous expectations from European policymakers of the involvement of the private sector, waking up dormant money, involvement of industries. How can European policymakers better engage with businesses, with industries? How can they be more or less inspired to be part of the effort?
Well, I'd say it's working together to determine, where the needed areas of investment are. I mean, we can see many places where businesses have incentives to invest and are doing so. But there's many others where, particularly infrastructure, where businesses depend on the government investment to make things work better. So, for example, we have strong incentive to use renewable energy for our data centers. So then we're investing in making that possible. And there's a lot of investment being made in renewable energy sources, but the grid and the transmission of renewable energy requires infrastructure upgrades, and that's where we depend on government and working together to make the whole chain work better.
All right. Now I'd like to open up a discussion and pick your brains with some of the most thorny issues when we talk about the Green Deal. I'll be giving you individual questions, but all the panelists, please feel free to jump in if you want to make a remark or you want to share something. Just give me a signal. Mr. Katainen, I would really like to tap into your experience on both the national and supranational level. How can the European Union actually project its leadership when it comes to climate change to other countries abroad? Because we know that Europe contributes to less than 10% of the CO2 emissions globally. So if we don't involve the big polluters like China, like Russia, like the US, we won't get ahead much. Where's the limits to European normative power, and how can we get them on board?
Well, there are few ways to look at it. First, we need global standards. For instance, when talking about the financial market, EU's taxonomy on sustainable financing is one starting point. And I do hope that it could become, or it could be a source of inspiration for the rest of the world to create global standards. The second point is that EU can be an example. We have already some good experiences of being exemplary. For instance, EU's eco-design directive is something which has created global standards for product policies, and the other or the producers of products in other markets in other countries have followed the European example. So standard setting power, I wouldn't like to underestimate the standard setting power which we have in our hands. So those are the two ways to look at the European role in a world. First of all, try to achieve multilateral agreements or global standards, but we can also be an early mover and set European standards, which sometimes, quite often actually, becomes a global standard.
Thank you. Telmo, how would you respond to pessimists who say that the European Green Deal is a classic example of wishful thinking and maybe too over-ambitious goals? And I'll give an example. Let's say the Just Transition Fund, which aims to support countries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, which are lagging behind on climate change reforms and restructuring of their economies. So can we actually expect that countries like Poland or Bulgaria are going to revamp their industries because some piecemeal funds are allocated to them in the next couple of years?
Thank you. Well, there will always be people who are in favor of progress, and there will always be people who are afraid of change, as Maria mentioned a while ago. There will be, I mean, the Green Deal, as everyone, all the panelists agreed, it will affect all different sectors of the economy. President von der Leyen said very clearly that the European Green Deal should be the next growth strategy. This means that it will affect all sectors of the economy. It means that there will be winners and there will be losers. In every changes will affect economies. Now, the best way, and I think Vice President Katainen explained it very well, the best way also is to show that everyone plays a role in the internal market. Everyone can find ways, opportunities here. And this will mean that some will have to adjust more profoundly than others. Coming to the example of the real situation of the coal regions, let's say, because we all know that one of the big issues of today's generation of CO2 emissions is the coal that is used to produce electricity, normally existing in Central Eastern European for historical reasons that I think we all know well why it was still there when they joined the EU. But one of the things that I think he has to prove is that it's becoming very costly. CO2, and actually coal as a cost, and the majority of the coal used in Polish power from Russia and China. And probably people should know a little bit more. But if by the reducing imports of coal, you could also reduce the monies that are transferred to our rivals, on this case, to buy coal. Secondly, there might be actually more cheap ways of producing electricity that is actually CO2 free of CO2, renewable energy, wind power, windmills, different technologies, linked more the use of bioeconomy, even using biomass to produce electricity, which reduces considerably the amount of CO2 emissions. So the basic thing will say, of course there will be costs, of course there will be changes, but at the end of the day, there has to be a positive outcome also from an economic point of view. I started by saying that this will affect all sectors of the economy. We spoke about few. Maria, you asked Maria about the agriculture. We all know it will not be easy. Actually, there are no easy questions. And when the Commission will start proposing or presenting the proposals next year, notably the big legislative package, what it is called the Fit for 55 package, with revising the EU legislation on energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and others, there will have to be choices that will have to be made and negotiations between the European Parliament, between the Council, and also with the active intervention of the private sector will have to take place. The point being, we have to start also by assuming that the situation today is not sustainable. It's not sustainable from a climate point of view, but also it's not sustainable economically, and that there could be better ways. Vice President Katainen, who has led the commission, the previous commission on the efforts on circular economy, knows well that the circular economy can be a source of wealth. Recycling more in Europe can be a source of wealth that we haven't tapped in correctly so far. So there has to be, and I think I mentioned this before, there has to be an effort of bringing as many sides supporting the Green Deal. Maria Spiraki made a very, very excellent point that we should find locomotives, let's say flagship projects, and the renovation wave, because it affects the way in which we live, the houses where we live, and the materials that build the houses where we live, and not least the workers that are needed for this sector, can be a good way of showing, in particular the Central Eastern European, that there can be other ways, more sustainable and actually better ways to live their lives. And the housing, let's say the housing stock in Central Eastern European could do with the renovation, and investments there could be better than building new power plants.
I would like to stop you right there. Also, there's some strong winds around you. Telmo just told us that there's going to be winners and losers from the European Green Deal. Let's get a bit political on this one. And Maria, I'm looking at you. Because of these potential losers and winners, do you see political divisions? I mean, we've seen political divisions across the EU, especially on geographical lines when we talk about the Green Deal, East versus West, North versus South. Do you see any major problems in the next couple of months?
And I think this is the division that we have to avoid. According to my approach, I think that it is to start adapting best practices and exchanging views in order to avoid the division. Because as you have already mentioned, the case of decarbonization, especially in regions that they are lacking behind, is very important. In Greece, we have two of them. It is the Western Macedonia and Megalopolis in Peloponnesus. And it is important now to act very, very fast and to speed up in order to meet the targets that we have already set by shutting down the lignite plants by 2024. So we are front runners, but at the same time, we need first best practices, second technical assistance. The Just Transition Mechanism is also providing technical assistance, but we need more. We need a detailed assistance in order to speed up. And third, of course, we need much more funding, not additional funding coming from the MFF, but the additionality that we can provide by using MFF, by using the Just Transition Fund, and by using also the involvement of the private sector. So yes, the danger is existing and it is here. Vice President Katainen comes from Finland. Finland is, allow me to say, zero waste economy, if I am correct. In Greece, we are landfilling 80% approximately of our waste. We have to change our model. We have to change our behavior. We have to adapt as soon as possible extended producer responsibility schemes. We have to incentivize the private sector in order to invest for specific industry in terms of regaining not only the critical raw materials, but also all kinds of materials that we have available, and also to go from waste to energy. This is of paramount importance. We have to demonstrate, we have to provide to the member states that they are lacking an alternative roadmap. And this roadmap is at a general level, at a wide level, at the EU level, the Green Deal. But we need also to specify, to give them a roadmap that it is fit and proper to their needs.
Mark, the private sector sometimes has been under the spotlight, and people have been saying that topics like sustainability or environmental protection are used by private companies only to boost their PR. From your experience, what industrial campaigns and initiatives can actually make the difference when we talk about environmental protection and climate change?
Well, I mean, greenwashing, like you're describing, is maybe fairly common, but maybe not unique to the corporate world. But I would say that, and revert back to one of my comments about carbon accountability, transparency, and reporting. These things are those initiatives, and some of which have been started by the European Union, are very important to ensure that people are reporting emissions and being able, authorities and consumers can compare companies' reports on a consistent basis. Right now, it's maybe too easy to make fuzzy claims when there's no consistent reporting requirements. So that initiative, we feel, is extremely important to make a difference in that area. But I would also say that there are some in the corporate world, some initiatives involving very serious players who are really moving the dial in this area, such as the coalition called We Mean Business, or the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So, in those groups, companies are voluntarily reporting, and there's a lot of peer pressure, there's examination of each other's commitments. And so this type of effort, even within industry, is ensuring that people are living up to their commitments.
I would like to very briefly give the floor back to my colleague Anna for some results online.
Thank you, Dimitar. Yes, indeed. Let's have a look at the results of our poll. So to the question, is a successful Green Deal Europe's top priority? We had an overwhelming majority of 76% of our participants voting yes and 24 voting no. So I would say definitely some room for optimism there. But Dimitar, now over to you for the final remarks of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We will run, of course, a bit over time because of the technical interruption we had. So I would like to give the floor to all our speakers with one common question. Hopefully they will all address it, and maybe you can also add in your closing remarks so we can wrap up the panel. Green Deal, reforms, recovery, there are substantial fears that if we invest too much effort and money on these topics, European competitiveness might suffer. Jobs might be lost, and industries might be damaged, especially looking at what's happening in China, in the US, and other countries might take advantage of this. So a question to all of your panelists: how would you address these comments and these fears? And maybe a couple of closing words. Mr. Katainen, you were shaking your head vigorously. Why? What do you want to tell us?
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is so old-fashioned thinking. If you listen what most of the European companies listed in public stock exchange are saying, they have also already made their choice. They want to be on the right side of the history, and what they are asking now is the regulatory environment which will last for quite some time, so that they can plan their sustainable investment and can expect some profit coming out. So as I said in the beginning, addressing climate change and changing business models towards circular economy will be one of the major driver in the global economy in coming years. That's for sure. Nothing will change this direction. My last remarks will come from our colleagues or the other panelists' opinions. First, I would like to build on what Maria said about the agriculture. I'm quite optimistic with agriculture in the future because farmers can be and they will be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Because carbon farming, for instance, producing more carbon sinks and combining this effort to circular bioeconomy is a new opportunity for farming society. Second thing, what I wanted to say is that once there are losers and winners, it's important to recognize that it's not necessarily, or actually, it's not primarily a political decision. Consumers will make their choice. And as we have seen, conscious consumer is something different today than a few years back. So people are ready to buy products which are more sustainable. And final point, EU is a great trade superpower, and we can use our trade policy for improving circular economy, for instance, or connecting climate policies to our trade agreements. And that's a big opportunity for Europe, but also it will level the playing field between Europe and third countries.
Thank you very much. Maria, how do you respond to these concerns?
I will start with the last sentence of Vice President Katainen, telling that we have the opportunity to set up the global standards, starting with the implementation of our trade agreements, for example, the Mercosur, by providing the precondition that if the members of Mercosur are not implementing the Paris Agreement targets, then we cannot import goods from our side. But it is important to understand that there is no alternative for us. We have to go forward by setting global standards, by meeting the new needs of the people, by addressing the concerns of the people. And in this regard, I think that we are ready. We are ready in terms of legislation. We need more political will by implementing the legislation in terms of regional and member states level. We need also enough and proper funding, and in this regard, we need further engagement of the part of the private sector by providing private sector not also stability but also predictability in the environment of investments. And the third one is the way that we will do it. Well, we can do it by engaging all stakeholders, not only industry, but also SMEs, not only consumers, but also students, not only politicians, but also academia. It is important to understand that it is the case for our generation, and we have to go ahead.
We do have to go ahead. Thank you for these words. Mark?
Well, I find myself in violent agreement with all those comments, and I'd have to just echo the support for the role of standard setting from Europe, and there's certainly a lot of attention around the world on what Europe is doing right now. And I would also just make a comment about the element of the just transition and really involving everyone and paying attention to the needs of this is a huge transition, both the green and digital transformation. And we need to look after all aspects of society in that regard. And in particular, there's, and it was mentioned earlier before, the need for skills, reskilling, upskilling. There's a lot we can do together, both public and private sector, to support the skilling needs of society to keep up and to have a just transition.
One can only hope that we achieve in this endeavor. And Telmo, closing words from your side.
Yes, well, very briefly. First, to say that NASA in the 60s did not plan to go to the moon because it was a nice thing to do. They planned it because they were faced with a challenge, was the Cold War at the time. The Russians had the ability to get to space. So now if we want to make the Green Deal the man on the moon moment, we also have to know that we are addressing this big challenge. Climate change is here, unfortunately, to stay unless everyone does a little thing, a bit to do it. But also because there's an ongoing threat by other players, China, US, you've mentioned them, on Europe's competitiveness. And here I think we have to follow also the wise words of Vice President Katainen saying, this is necessary. All this that we've been discussing, circularity, clean energy, more sustainable use of resources, is necessary for us to remain competitive in the world. The other thing, all other views are views from the past. And lastly, if I look into the European Council conclusions, the recent ones from October, because we know there will be a debate on climate goals, climate targets in December by the leaders, these targets should be delivered collectively and taking into account national circumstances or differences. And this goes very much to the point made by Maria and Mark, which has to do with we cannot look at this Green Deal as just one big project that should be applied with one size fits all approach, have to be taken into account the national circumstances. And one of the things that leaders and organizations such as the Martin Center should be going is to, shouldn't we identify a sort of catalog, country by country, identifying what are the needs of these countries, of these regions, and also what can they offer to other countries and other regions when it comes to clean energy transformation, circularity, and industrial approaches. So actually, in addition to the private sector, I think also the public sector and governments need to do their homework and get themselves prepared for a new reality, the Green Deal. Otherwise, we don't get to the moon.
I think this is a great way to finish the discussion. We need to do our homework, and we need to remember that the European Green Deal is not only about targets, it's about restructuring of our economies, it's about transforming our member states. With this, I would like to wrap our first panel and give the floor back to Anna.
Thank you, Dimitar. Thank you to the speakers for such a timely debate. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us for a virtual coffee break, and we will see each other again in 10 minutes for our next discussion. Tune in at 17.